I forgot my girlfriend's birthday again. You forgot her birthday again, didn't you? My sister River asked over the phone. I froze, pulling up the date. September 7th. She was right. The new strain of herpes virus at GeneTech had consumed my every waking moment. As the lead genetic engineer, I'd spent countless overtime hours running safety tests for a project promising breakthrough in mental health care. It was so important and so stressful that Leah's birthday had completely slipped my mind. Whatever, just make sure to wish her tomorrow at work, River said. She'll understand. I don't know, I muttered. Leah can be obsessive, you know. You remember when she thought I loved you more than her? River laughed. She remembered. Leah's outbursts had become infamous. Jealousy over my sister, threats to my best friend Brian, even hostility toward my parents. It was one of the reasons I'd moved out a few weeks ago, hoping some distance would help. But I hadn't cut her off completely. I couldn't. Make sure you wish her tomorrow, said River as she hung up. If she's still avoiding work tomorrow, just call her and just shower her with affection. Be lovey-dovey, and she will forget all grudges. The next day I went to work with a bouquet of roses and an apologetic letter. The labs were a maze of sterile white walls, filled with the smell of disinfectant and the subtle hum of centrifuges. I placed my bouquet in the refrigerator, planning to give it to her in the lunch break. But when I reached my station, there was someone else there, a new intern. "Where's Leah?" I asked, confused. "I'm your new partner," the intern replied. "Leah resigned." Resigned? That didn't make sense. Leah was committed to this project. It was her idea in the first place. I went straight to our manager. "She resigned yesterday," said the manager, barely glancing up from his computer. "She said it was something personal. I thought you'd know about it. She came early in the morning and took her stuff too." I walked back to the station and looked around. He was right. Leah had really taken everything with her. All of her equipment, few vials of the developing virus, the makeshift injection gun we had built, even her microscopes and centrifuges. Was it because of me? Did I really mess up that bad? I know I messed up. But wasn't this a bit too far? Sir, shall we start?" The intern stopped my train of thoughts. "Yeah, let's begin." After work, I decided to hit the bar like always. It was a weekly thing me and Brian did to unwind after a week's worth of work and stress. "Hey, David," I greeted the guard at the entrance. "How's your son?" He squinted at me, confusion evident on his face. "Do I know you?" "Really funny, David," I said as I reached for the door. David stopped me from entering. "Sir, I'd need to see some ID." "Oh, come on, man, I didn't bring any. You know me. You said that is enough identification since I'm a regular." "I've never seen you here before. So either you give me ID or I call the police." I felt helpless and confused. I've known David since the day I moved here. He told me and Brian over drink about his family, how his wife cheated on him, and now he's a single dad. That's when I saw Brian walking towards the bar. Perfect. "Dude, I think something's wrong with David." "He wouldn't let me enter without any ID," I said. Brian stops and looks me up and down. "I'm sorry, but do I know you?" I stood there, dazed. I couldn't believe my eyes and ears. My childhood best friend had just failed to recognize me. I did not know what to do. I held him by his shoulders. "Brian, please, it's me, Adam." I was on the verge of tears. "Let go of me or I will call the police." I obeyed. I walked slowly towards my car. I couldn't believe what was happening. My mind was going numb. I slowly opened the door and sat down, silently processing what just happened. The wind carried a smell of beer into the car, which reminded me of all the fun times I had with Brian at the pub. Wait, the wind? I looked to my right and found the window pulled down entirely. That's strange. I usually don't pull down my windows entirely, no matter how hot it gets. I shrugged it off. It didn't matter. I had just lost my best friend. Nothing else mattered. I tried to start my car, but it just wouldn't. Before I could register anything, someone grabbed me from behind the seat, which was followed by a sharp pain in the side of my neck. I woke up in my bed to a familiar melody. My phone was ringing. It was River. "Hey, are you sick again?" she asked. "No? Why, what happened?" "You forgot to wish me on my birthday." I paused. "I didn't," I stated. "Your birthday isn't for another 2 weeks." I froze after looking at the calendar, showing today's date. September 22nd. Fuck. My head hurts. "River, I think something is wrong with me. I don't remember anything that has happened in the last 2 weeks. I think I was in some sort of mild coma." There was silence. "Is this an excuse? Adam, you literally had dinner with me and Jared last night. Did you forget it all? I understand your poor work-life balance. No need to make excuses. Just saying, I think I need to see a doctor. I'll call you later." I drove as fast I could to the nearest clinic. I did not know what was going on at all. 2 weeks of my life, 2 whole weeks that I have no recollection of. On top of that, my headache seems to be getting worse by the minute. I need to know what is wrong with me. The doctor walks in with the report. "It seems like you're suffering from some sort of aggressive Alzheimer's disease. The MRI scan shows considerable buildup of amyloid plaques. We might need to take some more tests and family history to find the root cause." I walked out of the hospital, unable to believe it all. Nobody in my family had suffered from any sort of mental disease. Everything was happening too quickly. My brain still felt like it was being crushed from all sides. Just then my phone rang. It was Leah. I picked up, expecting her to shout at me like she always does. But to my surprise, her voice was calm, almost laced with honey. "Hello, my love. How are you doing?" she cooed. "Leah, where are you? I think something is happening to me." "You forgot her birthday too, didn't you?" There was silence. "What?" "You forgot the birthday of your own bitch sister, the one who took care of you after your parents died. You are such a work-absorbed dick. You forgot about me too. And now you will pay the price. I will use your own virus to take everything from you. You and everyone you love will slowly forget everything, just like you forgot about me. And then, my love, you will be truly and only mine." She hung up, and the pieces fell into place like shattered glass, cutting into my thoughts. The missing vials of the virus, the makeshift injection gun, Brian and David's sudden inability to recognize me, the sharp pain in my neck at the pub. She had done it, used our work against me. Leah had weaponized the virus to inflict Alzheimer's-like symptoms, making everyone around me forget who I was. Her revenge was cruelly elegant. Strip me of everyone, one memory at a time, until there was no one left but her. I sank to the floor, trembling, the weight of it all crushing my chest. This wasn't just my fault, it was my punishment. I'd ignored her, consumed by deadlines and experiments, blind to what she needed from me. Now she was taking everything I cared about, pulling me into a void where only she remained. Tears blurred my vision as a notification buzzed on my phone. "New message from River. I need you to come over. Leah is here and wants to talk to you." My heart stopped. No, not River. I stumbled to my feet, adrenaline coursing through me. Leah wouldn't stop at just my friends or me. She was going after my family now. I sprinted to the car, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled desperation. The road ahead blurred as my mind struggled to hold on to coherent thoughts, like water slipping through my fingers. Something was wrong. There was something I should remember, something important. But the pounding in my skull drowned it out. I couldn't think. I couldn't stop. I had to get to River. Before Leah did. The GPS app chimes, a robotic voice announcing, "Turn left in 200 meters. Left? Why left? I glance at the screen, seeing the destination pinned. River's house. Why am I going to River's house? The destination triggers a faint sense of recognition, but the familiarity is hollow, like grasping at smoke. Shit. My head hurts. I make the turn anyway, hoping muscle memory will guide me. My foot eases off the accelerator as doubt creeps in. It seemed like something urgent, but I just couldn't put a finger on it. My headache is going to kill me. I parked in River's driveway, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. This house, it was vaguely familiar. Wasn't this where River lived with her new boyfriend? I knocked on the door. "Hey, how can I help you?" There is something I am forgetting. My head hurts. "River? Yeah? Who are you and what are you doing here? The strange woman's questions were justified. Who am I and what am I doing here?
Story number 2. I found evidence. My parents were members of a satanic cult. Remove your skin, remove your sin, remove the life you sold to them. I found that lyrical little ditty scrawled inside a dusty old tome, hidden in a secret passageway in my father's basement. Reading those words confirmed all my suspicions. The man who raised me was a black magician, and he'd fucked around and let something unspeakable loose upon the narrow little streets of our suburban community. Let me back up a second here. You may or may not remember reading about Pastor Noah Winters. 3 years ago on Christmas, Winters fell through the floorboards of his pulpit while delivering his annual Yuletide soliloquy for the congregation at St. Mary's. Built sometime in the 20s, St. Mary's had seen better days, and the pastor's penchant for pacing while he preached had worn the floor to little more than a hard film that, on this particular day, finally gave out. Hidden below was what the media dubbed a Satan dungeon. That's right, living, breathing proof of a satanic cult that had operated right here in suburban America sometime in the mid to late 70s. The modern world had all dismissed the 80s and its satanic panic long ago, but maybe there was some fire that came with that smoke, at least here in Woodlands Hills. Think about it. I mean, a popular Lutheran church attended by hundreds of people a week had a satanic altar underneath it. What's more, there were some pretty racy accoutrements found down there too. Not the least of these was what turned out to be the oldest grimoire known to man. Pastor Winters suffered a broken leg. The Synod, kind of the Archdiocese for Lutherans, approved an emergency renovation of the church, and the book, rumored to be bound in human flesh, went up for auction at the Sotheby's where my father worked. Understand, Dad is an ex-hippie. My sister Sammy and I knew all about his acid days. Still, based on stuff I overheard as a kid, I definitely harbored the suspicion he'd spent some time running in pretty dark circles in the 70s. He'd lived on the West Coast for most of his early life, then relocated to the Midwest in his late 20s. From what I gathered, he and some buddies fled NorCal pretty quickly after getting into trouble, messing around in some kind of cult. Yeah, my family's pretty fucked up, right? Anyway, I remember a neighbor telling him the gossip about St. Mary's in the book. I remember it because there was something in his eyes, something I'd never seen before. The sale took place in October of last year. A month later, Dad lost his job when the auction winner had his purchase appraised and found the genuine article excavated from the cave beneath St. Mary's had been replaced with a crafty facsimile. I knew right away who had that book. By this time, I was in college, usually home 1 or 2 weekends a month. My sister was a senior in high school, super smart, and poised to study in the UK after graduation. When I returned for Christmas break, we headed out to a friend's house for drinks. She told me how, about a week before my arrival, she started seeing a lot of greasy-looking dudes around the house, all of whom Dad introduced as old friends. Our mom had been out of the picture for years, and Sammy often came home and found all these cars in the driveway, but no one inside. She was an A student, and, apart from the occasional margarita, not a troublemaker at all. Me, though? I knew every hiding place in the house from back when I used to sell drugs to friends, so I knew exactly where all those people parking in our driveway were going. See, there's an old laundry room in the basement. We hadn't used it in years, after Dad put a brand new washer-dryer in the mudroom around my 6th birthday. Part of that room's back wall opened into a small closet, barely more than a nook with a couple of shelves. You know, a place for your detergent, dryer sheets, and whatnot. As a teenager looking for a place to hide shit, I'd learned the wall of that closet swung inward. Behind it, stairs leading down. Yeah, it sounds mad, right? Totally true, though. You go down the stairs, and there's this, tunnel. It leads east to the edge of our property. Dead ends in a stone doorway that, while I could never get open, a friend and I figured out must open into this big hill in the field behind our neighborhood. The field beyond which stands, you guessed it, St. Mary's. So what do we have so far? A weird snippet of gothy poetry, evidence of a local satanic cult, and a book of spells stolen by my father and his occultist friends. Christmas rolled around, and the weirdest thing happened. Mom came home. Yeah, it was surreal. She literally drove up, parked in her old spot, and opened the front door with keys she hadn't used in nearly 10 years. Sammy and I were stunned. I mean, what do you say to the woman who walked out on you? We hadn't heard a peep since she'd left, and then there she was, sitting at the kitchen table with a can of beer and a perpetually burning Pall Mall. It was a lot, and Sammy had a meltdown. I followed her to her boyfriend Cole's house to make sure she was okay. She wasn't. And then I went back, thinking I'd have it out with Mom. Only when I got back, there was no sign of her or Dad. Her half-drunk Molson sat on the table, and the butt from her cigarette lay smoldering in the shapeless ceramic ashtray Sammy had made her for Christmas in first grade. Dad never had the heart to throw the thing away, like all Mom's other shit. She was still here, and so was Dad. I took the stairs into the basement as quietly as I could. The old tube TV against the far wall was filled with analog snow, and I could hear Black Sabbath's The Warning playing somewhere far off. I rounded the only corner and saw the laundry room door open a crack, neon blue light spilling out onto the chipped tile floor. I opened the door and saw the hidden passage in the wall yawned wide. The music grew louder. I could hear Tony Iommi's phrasing on the final passage of the song. My brain latched onto it, the only familiar thing in an altogether alien evening. I crossed the threshold into the tunnel, where thick particles from the past floated in the neon darkness. I inched across the world beneath our backyard until I came to that door I couldn't open as a kid. It was open. I knew the moment I crossed the threshold that I was in the Satan altar below the church. This meant that A, the synod's renovation hadn't touched this underground chamber below St. Mary's, and B, my parents had to have been involved in making, or at least using, the original altar, which stood before me, like the horn of a giant goat. No sign of my parents or anyone else, but 10 feet in front of me, the grimoire lay open on the altar, the crawling blue neon light beaming up from its open pages, coating the walls and ceiling. Across the room, draped atop a pile of jagged 2x4s and shattered stone, I found what looked like skin shed by a couple of giant snakes. One of them had a mustache. Mom and Dad were back together, and whatever they'd started, back before we were born, seemed to be in motion again. Story. No 3. I went for a drive to clear my head, but something wasn't right. Ever since I got my full license and could drive independently, I'd head out late at night to clear my head or just unwind. I'd sneak out of my room, careful not to make any noise, grab my coat, boots, phone, and wallet, and then drive off to some back roads. I'd usually be gone for just 1 or 2 hours, enough time to drive somewhere, park, and unwind before heading back. I kept this to myself. During the drive, I'd maybe see 1 or 2 other cars, and I almost never encountered anyone when I got to my destination. These drives usually happened around 2 or 3 a.m., when most people weren't out, and that's exactly what I wanted. Anyways, I'm writing this after getting home from one of those drives, and I'm hoping someone here can help me make sense of it, or at least tell me if I'm going crazy. It was the same as any other night. I got out of bed, threw on some clothes, grabbed my coat, boots, keys, wallet, and phone, just like always, and stepped out into the snowy night. I walked over to my car, unlocked it, started the engine, and waited for it to warm up before heading out. While I waited, I rubbed my hands together, trying to keep warm. I always felt a little vulnerable, just sitting there in the car, waiting for it to heat up. So I kept glancing around, checking to see if my parents had noticed or if anyone was walking around, even though it was late. But like every other night, there was no one around. No one to see me start up the car. And once I pulled out of the driveway, it was the same. Still no one around. I drove out of the neighborhood and onto the main road. After a while, I turned off and made my way down the back roads. The pavement grew more uneven. The houses spaced farther apart until they were almost entirely replaced by forest. I lived in the countryside, so it didn't take long to get away from society. I was driving down a road I'd been on plenty of times before. As I approached a bend, I noticed what looked like another set of headlights through the trees. Nothing unusual. I'd see cars every now and then. But when I rounded the bend, there was no one there. There weren't any turnoffs on the road, so I figured it must have been my headlights, reflecting off something in the woods. But as I kept driving, unease started to creep in. It felt like I kept seeing more headlights, vanishing in and out of sight like they were just out of reach. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, or maybe cars parked off to the side, turning off their headlights before I could spot them. It was pretty dark out, and unless something was right in front of me or had its light, it was hard to see anything. A few miles later, I parked at my usual spot. I sat there for a minute, trying to shake off the feeling. It was just weird reflections. Nothing to worry about. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to shake off the unease. I'd been out here enough times to know that in the silent darkness, your mind can play tricks on you. Something about trying to stimulate itself when there's nothing else to focus on. Still, something about tonight felt different. The headlights seemed too real to be just tricks, but they had to be. I couldn't think of any logical reason for what I was seeing. After a few minutes, I decided to get out. The cold air hit me as I opened the door, biting at my skin. The silence was suffocating, and I immediately regretted leaving the warmth of the car. The snow crunched under my boots as I paced around, trying to shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone. Tonight felt different. I'd never felt this uneasy before. I laughed a little at myself, trying to brush it off. There was nothing around, just trees, snow, and the quiet whisper of the wind. I looked back at the car, my thoughts lingering on the road and those headlights. My eyes automatically scanned the trees around me, expecting to see some movement. But there was nothing. No cars, no lights, just the same endless dark. After taking a few deep breaths of the cool night air, I went back to the car, planning to head home. I got back into the driver's seat and checked all my mirrors. In the rear view, there was a set of unmistakable headlights. They had to be real. There was nothing else. I stared at them, not taking my eyes off the reflection as they grew closer. Eventually, the car passed by me. I glanced over at it as it went by. A blue truck, a middle-aged man wearing a high-vis jacket. As he passed, he briefly looked in my direction, and something about his gaze felt off. I can't quite describe it, but if you've ever seen those uncanny valley videos online, you'll know what I mean. He looked human, but there was something about him that made him feel not human. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The vanishing headlights, the constant unease, and now this guy in the truck. I put my car in drive and started heading home, but it felt like I was being followed. I saw more headlights ahead, which usually brought me a sense of relief on most nights. But tonight, they only scared me. Each time I got close enough, they would vanish. I glanced in my mirrors, and there they were again. More lights. With each pair of headlights I saw, my panic grew. Story. No 3. I went for a drive to clear my head, but something wasn't right. Ever since I got my full license and could drive independently, I'd head out late at night to clear my head or just unwind. I'd sneak out of my room, careful not to make any noise, grab my coat, boots, phone, and wallet, and then drive off to some back roads. I'd usually be gone for just 1 or 2 hours, enough time to drive somewhere, park, and unwind before heading back. I kept this to myself. During the drive, I'd maybe see 1 or 2 other cars, and I almost never encountered anyone when I got to my destination. These drives usually happened around 2 or 3 a.m., when most people weren't out, and that's exactly what I wanted. Anyways, I'm writing this after getting home from one of those drives, and I'm hoping someone here can help me make sense of it, or at least tell me if I'm going crazy. It was the same as any other night. I got out of bed, threw on some clothes, grabbed my coat, boots, keys, wallet, and phone, just like always, and stepped out into the snowy night. I walked over to my car, unlocked it, started the engine, and waited for it to warm up before heading out. While I waited, I rubbed my hands together, trying to keep warm. I always felt a little vulnerable, just sitting there in the car, waiting for it to heat up. So I kept glancing around, checking to see if my parents had noticed or if anyone was walking around, even though it was late. But like every other night, there was no one around. No one to see me start up the car. And once I pulled out of the driveway, it was the same. Still no one around. I drove out of the neighborhood and onto the main road. After a while, I turned off and made my way down the back roads. The pavement grew more uneven, the houses spaced farther apart, until they were almost entirely replaced by forest. I lived in the countryside, so it didn't take long to get away from society. I was driving down a road I'd been on plenty of times before. As I approached a bend, I noticed what looked like another set of headlights, through the trees. Nothing unusual. I'd see cars every now and then. But when I rounded the bend, there was no one there. There weren't any turnoffs on the road, so I figured it must have been my headlights, reflecting off something in the woods. But as I kept driving, unease started to creep in. It felt like I kept seeing more headlights, vanishing in and out of sight like they were just out of reach. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, or maybe cars parked off to the side, turning off their headlights before I could spot them. It was pretty dark out, and unless something was right in front of me or had its light, it was hard to see anything. A few miles later, I parked at my usual spot. I sat there for a minute, trying to shake off the feeling. It was just weird reflections, nothing to worry about.